Hey, what's good? It's Guapee here. I'm a Revenant main with over 70,000 kills across multiple platforms, and today I'm going to teach you how to master Revenant in every single way possible. So we're going to start off with this tactical ability, Silence. It has a hell of a lot more to offer than just taking away enemies' abilities. As a matter of fact, you can use it to cause visual and audio clutter. A lot of the time people ask why I just throw my Silence what appears to be randomly, and whilst 9 times out of 10 I'm throwing it intentionally, occasionally I do fat finger it. The reason why I'm throwing it around in so many places that may be considered to be random, it's actually just to cause a lot of clutter against the enemy. So for example, if I'm running this way and I'm trying to create distance between the enemy and I, let's say someone's chasing me here, either if I have it in time, I'll look at the ground and throw it here. That's either going to deter them from pushing, or they may run through it and take the 10 damage and the stun, because when you run through it you are forced to walk temporarily and then you have to start sprinting again. But also it's going to cause just visual and audio clutter, so sometimes I'll do it from, let's say, here, and sometimes you'll see me, let's say I'm rezzing a teammate, I'll throw it down on my teammate first and then stick the res inside of the Silence. The initial sound it makes is very loud. The sound it makes like this isn't very loud, so you want to stick the res very quickly. Of course you can pop heals inside of it as well. You see it throwing my feet all the time. Let's say I'm fighting in a building, there's a lot of people around, I'm trying to get a heal off, I can throw it either, let's say, an elevator shaft or a doorway, something just to cause any sort of distraction away from the sound of me healing, and that way people are less interested or they don't even know where I am to push. Okay, so the next thing we're going to go over is how to learn the Revenant Wallrunning Tech. This is quite a useful thing to learn, especially if you're going to go all out and main the character. Being conscious of your passive is very useful. You want to be using it as much as possible, but learning the wall run tech that he has available is also something you can't really sleep on, and I feel like if you're going to invest in the character you need to learn it. The way you do this is actually very easy, it just takes a little bit of practice to learn. It's just a few steps. So you're going to start with a wall jump onto the corner, or you're going to run up to the wall and hold a directional input, either left or right. So let's say I want to walk into the right, I'm just going to hold D like that. It depends on where you're starting, so if you want to get into the wall run like this, you would wall jump at the corner. If you want to do it from here, you're going to have to wall run into it first. And then at the corner, jump, turn to the next wall whilst holding a directional input, and then scroll up to tap strafe. You keep hold of your directional input, like I'm wall running this way, so I'm going to keep hold of D and I'm never going to let go of it. And then at the corner, I'm going to jump, turn to the next wall whilst scrolling up to tap strafe. It looks like this. So jump, turn to the next wall, tap strafe whilst holding the directional input. So basically just jumping and tap strafing at every corner whilst holding down that key, whether it's left or right. So here's the other way. Very simple. That's the basic tech, just a simple wall run chain around the corners. Definitely the easiest one to learn, but we've also got some variations you can use in fights as well. Okay, so the next variation, I can't unfortunately demonstrate in the firing range. You're basically spamming jump and scroll up whilst holding a directional input in the curved elevator shafts in streamer building, for example, and it looks like this. You're just spamming jump and scroll whilst looking upwards and either to the left or the right, depends on which way you're going, and still holding the directional input. So instead of just doing it once at a corner, you're just going to spam your scroll wheel up and down, or space and then scroll up, depends on what you naturally use for jumping. This one's pretty tricky to do, you have to be really fast at the spam. This could also vary depending on what kind of scroll wheel you're rocking on your mouse, how effective it is. I found that some mice are actually better for doing this technique because of how stiff and how unstiff certain scroll wheels are. This one's super niche, but it looks awesome, and if you can combine it with a Superglide, for example, up on the mantle, it's a really nasty combo. And the last wall run technique I'm going to talk about is something I call the rewind, where you're basically just reversing the technique. It's pretty tricky to do. You can basically enter a wall run and then tap strafe it back around into the wall like this. And the way you do that is you keep your directional input held down. So on this direction I'm holding D and I don't let go of it. Instead I jump off the wall, I turn all the way around this way whilst scrolling up, and then as I get to this point, once I've turned around, I hold W and A to latch back onto the wall, which is going to send you up a little bit, but it also sends you back to the left enough to the point where you're going to hit the corner, and you're going to do the same thing. You jump and tap strafe and look to the next wall. Tricky to do, but you can really catch people off guard with this because you're just reversing the entire direction that you're going. It's really effective.
Alright, 3 fucking people on me.
Okay, so now we're going to go over the totem, which is definitely Revenant's worst ability. I don't think it's good at all, definitely needs a rework, but we've got a couple of unique mechanics you may not know about that are extremely useful. In my opinion, the most important technique that most people won't use for totem is blocking doors. I think totem overall should be used to third-party massive fights. If you want to get some, maybe you're in a massive fight on your own, or you're solo, or just anything of the sort, you're getting clouded by enemies. If you have a safe spot to put it in a building, then you can get busy whilst being safe, knowing that you're going to get sent back to pressure people, maybe outside or inside. And of course, using it to third-party teams from a long distance as well is extremely useful. But it's also not reliable, it can be camped very easily. And I just don't think it's very good based on the fact that you are flesh when you are in it. So the aim punch you receive from bullets makes it very difficult to put out any sort of substantial damage unless you get a really good jump on the enemy or use your movement tech correctly. So the reason why I say door blocking is so useful is that if you are being chased by multiple people, obviously Revenant is a big character with no useful disengage or if anything's remotely supposed to save himself. If you want to create distance between your enemies and you, get them on the door, maybe they're trying to kick it down, immediately look at your feet and cast a totem like so, and it will block the door. And in that time you can either do a few things. You can either just run away, get distance from you and the enemy, and try to pop a bat. This is easily the thing that I use the most and is actually extremely effective. But if you want to do something risky, you could also just block the door like so. If you have enough grenades, just back up and spam the door with grenades, and if you get lucky, if the enemy makes the incorrect decision to kick the door down and take the totem, which a lot of players will do, they're just going to get detonated by the first 3 grenades that you throw, and anything after that is not only going to explode the totem, but they're going to get sent back to the totem, and then it's going to get reset, and then anything else that's left there, any more of your grenades are just going to completely destroy them. So the next tip I have is something a bit more universal, not just for Rev, but I think it's incredibly important on Revenant, and that's just to learn Superglides. Revenant is a huge character. He's only behind Newcastle, so he's the 4th biggest character in the game. He's taller than Pathfinder, bigger than Pathfinder. He doesn't even have a grapple or anything to escape. So, in my opinion, it's really important to learn movement techs and utilize them in fights to help you escape. If you're not using movement to help Rev, you're most likely just going to get destroyed in 1v1s for the most part, because he has a huge disadvantage. He doesn't have fortified, so catch like a Newcastle and a Revenant in a 1v1. They're both borderline the same size, except Newcastle takes less damage. So Revenant, I feel like, is extremely important to learn Superglides on. Learn how to directional Superglide and tap strafe. There are plenty of guides for this out there. I don't think it's hard to learn at all, personally. I think Supergliding is actually an incredibly useful mechanic, and that is the mentality I recommend you go with. Either you're having trouble getting timing down, or what's most likely happening is your keyboard isn't very good for Superglides. It's incredibly useful to do in fights, and it is going to save you and help you escape a lot of situations. For the final tip, I want to talk about how to use Revenant in buildings and traversing. Revenant is, compared to something like Wraith, quite a different playstyle. Like, if you're in a zipline building, which obviously most MK players like to fight in, he's more of a streamlined, smooth character in the way that you fight. He's not going to be able to disengage well. If you run across 3 people at once, you're most likely going to die instantly. He can't pop a bang smoke or a stim or something like that. However, if you get into a nice flow state where you are constantly moving around a building, the gameplay in the background should be a good example of what it looks like when you're perfectly using his abilities in tangent to sort of move around the zipline buildings better than any other character could within a nice flow. There's vents on the sides of the buildings, you can climb up over doors and chain it into a wall run and sort of loop around the building better than any other character really can. Unfortunately, it's still not the most effective movement in the game. He is massive, he does suck overall, but this is what you got to do to stay alive as him. So that's going to be about it from me. Hopefully you found the video entertaining and useful. Be sure to drop a like and a sub if you want to see more of this content. Until next time, guys. Peace.